Well, why don't we go ahead and start because my stomach does not feel great. Um, I doubt I shit myself, but I'm just feeling kind of blah, you know?
Yeah, let's drink some sugary liqueur.
Yeah, that'll help.
Does anybody have a bigger bottle than this, or are we all sporting the little ones?
I actually have, well, talking about big spender, I've got a 200 milliliter here
Wow.
Oh,
because I couldn't find an airplane bottle.
oh, okay.
I don't know why. It's like everywhere is sold out or something, or maybe they're hard. Everything's all fucked, you know. But all the places that had them, like the tubs of them and stuff,
Yeah.
they were empty as fuck right now.
Huh.
So I ended up finding one of these at least, which pretty crazy. They have 200 milliliters, but hey, whatever works.
How much was that?
Yeah, they're
This was $6, so
All right.
not bad.
it's not bad. There's a lot of Jack shortages across their portfolio. All their flavors are pretty behind right now. So I imagine they're using the juice to fill 750s and 175s before airplane bottles.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Another Bourbon Show. We're staying with the theme of last week, and we are trying some, Stephen, I like the term you used, whiskey adjacent items, right? It's not whiskey, certainly not bourbon, but it's whiskey adjacent. And tonight we're going to be drinking some Jack Daniel's honey instead of the American honey. Stephen, why don't you show your bottle instead? His is a little bit better. It's out of focus, but
Hold on. We can fix this. I can manually focus. These people have never seen
they
Jack
haven't,
Daniel's bottle before.
especially not this particular one.
How about that?
That is probably sitting on the counter at the liquor store or in a bin when you're checking out at Walmart or your grocery store. So there you go. That's that beautiful label. It's 70 proof. It's again, this is not whiskey. It is a liqueur that's based on whiskey. And so we're not going to talk about the mash bill. We're not going to talk about any of that shit. Let's just get to, what everybody tunes in for. Let's get to that label rating.
So I think when I gave the Jack Daniel's rating previously, now I'm gonna be all fucking out of foot. There we go. It's pretty good. Whenever I gave the Jack Daniel's bottle review, I think I gave it a 5 out of 10 because I said that it was kind of like the Jim Beam, what Jim Beam white label is to like whiskey overall. The Jack Daniel's bottle was to labels overall, and so I think that's pretty true here. I think that it's really, I mean, I think the Jack Daniel's bottle is nice. It's just very simple. And I think this is a nice way to show that it's a different product, different thing. And there's a little bit of style to it. I like the color is nice. I think it's very easily, I knew, like I said earlier, I had a tough time finding Jack honey right now with some supply issues locally. But whenever I saw this on the shelf from a distance, I was like, there we go. That's it. It's very easily recognizable and that's always a win. And then I think that the bee looks nice. It's very subtle, but the little bee they put on there, just very cute, nice. And they went with like a metallic color to it rather than just doing a yellow or something like that and spicing it up. And in comparison to some of the other liqueurs, again, I think it's just a little bit of a step up in the presentation. And as a whole, the bottle gets pretty much just as much presentation and just as much presence as their regular their regular whiskey. So I think that it's a good label, and I think that because it has a little more pizzazz than the regular, I'm gonna give it a 6. And if I did like I'm tempted to go with my first half rating, give it like a 6.5 because I think it's a pretty good label. But yeah, pretty much right in that range.
Okay. Yeah, and so that one is a little bit different than the larger size, but these 50 mLs are really just shrunk down plastic versions of the full 750 milliliter bottle.
And I've got the 200 milliliter. I said that earlier, but just so the viewers at home know, this is a weird 200 milliliter bottle I was able to find. So.
Yeah, that looks like that's like a very medicinal style bottle instead of like the standard.
Yeah,
like that looks like cough syrup could be in it.
Right, or like a travel like Listerine or something.
Yeah,
that
there you
kind
go.
of thing.
Yep. The one thing that I cued in on that you said that, and that's how identifiable it is, that Jack Daniel's arch the way they arch,
Right.
it really makes it recognizable no matter what from a distance. You recognize, like, other companies have tried matching that arch, but they don't get it quite the way Jack Daniel's does, in my opinion.
Yep. 100% agreed. I think it's just a really nice label, and they all look nice together on a shelf. Like if you had every single one of the Jack Daniel's products in a line, they all look good. They all make sense and everything. So yeah, nice product line.
So Ryan and I both have the 50 ml bottles. I paid $2.50 for this tiny little bottle, and whenever I paid the $2.50 for it, the owner of the store was there, and he goes, man, he goes, I know the price went up. He goes, sometimes I can get case deals. He goes, and when I get case deals, I buy literally shit tons of cases, and I can sell them for 99 cents. He goes, but then if I run out and there's not a case deal on it, then I got to pay the full price, and I got to jack the price up. He goes, so it's $2.50. He goes, but normally I think he said it would normally be $1.50. And I was like, oh no, how dare you charge me $1 more?
Yeah.
So,
but anytime you say that, it's a defense mechanism, because he's used to dealing with schizophrenic, insane people,
Yep. Exactly.
And I mean, and when you look at it too, I mean, $2.50 for one of these, and a regular $7.50 $19.99 usually.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not getting it's not good value. It's just you could drink it easier.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you don't have to have your
change.
You don't have to have your change cup out there for nearly as long to get this one as you do the full size bottle.
No, your fix goes away.
Well, what do you say? We want to dive in and start drinking some almost whiskey, some near whiskey?
Yeah, let's do it.
Off the nose compared to the American honey, and I have the 375 here next to me. Mm-hmm. It is a lot less syrupy smelling. Like,
yes, it is
way less syrupy.
But it still has it's almost like a musty sugar still, though, that I smell. I don't know if you guys ever had, my mom had this plastic container that always held the sugar. It was almost like a pourer for sugar at our house, mm-hmm. for coffee and stuff like that. And the inside of that smelled
Ryan doesn't know what you're talking about because his was crystal, but yeah. I get it.
But that plastic container of sugar basically kind of had the smell when it was mostly empty. I just remember of this glass, and that's the mm-hmm. first thing I think of when I smell this.
Yeah, you can smell the sweetness. You can tell that the honey's there. You can tell that it's alcohol, but it's masked well, right? Like you can tell that this is a whiskey-based product, but just faintly, yeah. Right? I don't know that it's much more alcohol smelling than NyQuil, honestly. But sweet. No, I'm gonna sip it. Cheers. Oh, this is a whiskey person's honey flavored whiskey.
Yeah,
this would taste terrible on waffles. This would not be good on waffles.
Well, we're going to test that claim in a little bit, by the way, if this is a whiskey drinker's honey flavored whiskey, because I do have some Jim Beam honey and some Evan Williams honey to sample alongside, just so that we have the full spectrum in case we don't do episodes on those later. So
okay. All right.
But I think that, to me, tasting this, it's just nostalgic, because Ryan and I this was one of our first sippers we would get together. And I think part of that was the price. The price was right when you would go out to a bar, just have a glass of it. And it paired well with the acid Cuba Cuba cigars.
It did.
Yeah.
It paired better than with the Fireball, I'd say. That we also did.
Infinitely better. But it's the flavor to me of late summer, early fall. A new semester was starting. Nature's healing. Ryan and I are getting drunk again in Edwardsville.
Y'all are torching your livers some more.
Oh yeah.
I think
it does. It does
ahead.
remind me of that, Stephen, though, and maybe a little Oktoberfest beer too that we drink with it. Just all those things.
Yeah.
I will say that two things. Number one, I think it bears noting that this is only 10 proof lower than regular Jack Daniels, if memory serves. Jack Daniels standard is 80, right?
Yep, 40% alcohol. This is 35%.
Yeah. So this is not a far cry off of the Jack Daniels standard product line. Whereas with the American Honey, they're dropping that at full 15% alcohol to get it into that bottle at 71% instead of 101. Because 101, they do offer other, like there is a wild turkey that's not 101 proof, but their flagship is the 101. And the flagship for Jack Daniels is the 80 proof. So I think that bears mentioning. So if you like Jack Daniels, this isn't too far off of that standard proof. And second of all, I want to throw out there that even though the American Honey was 1 proof point higher, this has more of the alcohol feeling sensation on my tongue than the American Honey did.
Yes. But it doesn't have any sort of finish or burn. I'm sorry if I cut you off there.
No, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is that we did talk last week about the American Honey giving you that Kentucky hug, and this does not at all.
Yep, super smooth, super. I mean, you are ready for the next sip immediately. It's the only thing that finish does is make your mouth water a little bit to me. And like it makes you want to, it's kind of a dry taste, makes you want to go back for another drink, but that's about it.
Yeah, comparing it to the American Honey, it's just much easier to drink, in my opinion. And I'm not just saying that, for reasons you might think I should say it. The American Honey was just so syrupy and, kind of artificially tasted weird. You know what I mean? From whatever they put in that bottle. And this is just a lot more like Jack Daniels than American Honey is to their mainline products.
And I would even say that Jack Honey to me it's like a sweet whiskey. It's not so much honey, honestly. As funny as that might be to say, it's not that I don't get any honey whatsoever. It's just that predominantly I just feel like it's kind of a sweet whiskey. And for that reason, I think something that you said last episode, Dan, is more true in that, or you just suggested maybe you could use the American Honey as a simple syrup. And I think that the Jack Daniels Honey might be a little better for that because the American Honey had so much flavor on its own, so much character that it brought in with that lemon aftertaste, that I don't think it would work for every old fashioned you might make. But I think you could probably make it work with Jack Honey just because it's basically just kind of a sweet whiskey.
Yeah. And I don't know, like for some reason, this is making sense in my head, and I'm going to bounce it off you two and see if you feel the same way. So with the American Honey, it kind of feels like they started off with a big old vat of fake honey and poured alcohol into it until it became 71 proof, and then they stirred it up. Whereas this, it feels like they started off with a vat of Jack Daniels and added honey flavoring until it got to 70 proof. And again, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but to me, it just seems like the American Honey is mostly sweet, fake sweet, honey flavored shit with some alcohol added. Whereas this is more like, nah, we want to keep the whiskey taste, but give it that honey flavor.
Yeah, 100%. It's almost like the difference between like intentionally making a cocktail or being in college and just having Powerade and vodka and being like, let's drink this. You know what I mean? The mindset starts from, we have a good product. Let's add something to it instead of like, well, we have this kind of thing that I'd rather get drunk with than drink on its own.
Yeah.
Even when you compare like the Jack Fire to Fireball too, it's you taste, you get the remnants of Jack Daniels in that Jack Fire shot that you're drinking, whereas Fireball, and I know you don't have, there's no, you know, Fireball bourbon without the cinnamon and all that stuff, but it tastes more like a whiskey when you're doing that shot of Jack Fire than the cordial that is Fireball.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, and Jack Fire has kind of always been second fiddle to Fireball, but the last few years, I mean, Fireball's a huge brand, but Jack Fire is picking up steam too.
Yeah. And I want to throw out there that I can't necessarily speak for Ryan or Steven, but I can only speak for myself, but I think I'm also covering them. And that's not to say that, like, we're not talking bad about Fireball nor American Honey, just the differences between the two of them. And if somebody prefers Fireball over Jack Fire, okay, cool. It's a different perspective, right? And the same way with the Jack Honey versus the American Honey. Anybody who's listening or watching, I just really want you to know that if you buy American Honey, like, you are going to feel diabetic. Like, it is sugar. It is sugar with some whiskey. Whereas this is whiskey with some sugar, at least the way it tastes.
Yeah. And there are those days too where I've, you know, Fireball or Jack Fire, and I'll go with the Fireball because I don't really feel like drinking whiskey or like reminding myself of whiskey. You know, you have those days where you're just in the mood for something else. So that said, with American Honey too, and Fireball, if you want something as like authentic as a bourbon or like a Jack or something like that, then go for those ones. But if whiskey's your thing, if bourbon's your thing, you're going to want to probably stay with the Jack flavors compared to most other things. And now I know the Jim Beam and the Evan Williams. So I don't know how those ones are. I think I've had Evan Williams. Maybe I had it like 12 years ago when I was like 18, but since then I haven't had it. But I can't imagine it's like this.
Well, I'm dying to find out.
Well, I just poured Jim Beam honey first, and it is 65 proof. And my initial impression from smelling it and looking at it is that 5% makes a huge fucking difference because it is super light. I mean, so you have a comparison here. Not that either one of these is dark. Yeah. And it's really more subtle on camera than it is in person. But I would say that the Jack Honey here is probably like 2 shades maybe darker. And the scent is completely different. The Jim Beam honey is like if you took water and you put a few splashes of honey in it or a few drops of honey in it. I smell no alcohol whatsoever, which probably isn't shocking if you just picture blending anything with Jim Beam, you know. But I'll go ahead and give it a taste, see what it's like. This just tastes like honey with water, man. That's straight up what it is. I mean, no alcohol flavor at all. This is honey water. It probably tastes the most like honey to me out of anything we've had so far.
Okay.
But it tastes nothing like alcohol. So if you did not like alcohol at all and you loved honey, Jim Beam honey might be your thing so far because it literally tastes like no alcohol. The aftertaste and everything a part of this experience is just honey. It is just honey that's in liquid form. That's exactly what this is. Pretty crazy.
Any peanuts?
Let me see. Maybe a little bit at the start, but so quickly it goes away, and it is just honey. Yeah. And I mean, this is, for as sweet as you thought the American Honey was, Dan, this is another level. This is pretty crazy because it's literally like you made, like, if you injected this in your vein, I think you'd immediately have like a heart attack or something. It's just
It's that sweet.
It's that sweet. It's that
Okay.
sweet with nothing else going on. Like
Okay.
the American honey was super sweet, maybe even more sweet overall. But the fact that it cut through it with citrus or something,
Yeah.
the fact that there was a burn, the fact that you were told there was like, well, it's not just honey because this other stuff is happening that's not honey like, but this is just like watered down honey. So
Okay. The reason I was trying to clarify there is because, like, when we poured the American honey, it poured almost like syrup too, right? And it left legs on the glass almost like it was syrup. Tonight,
yeah, this does leave some decent legs on the glass, but
like tonight, this is the American, the Jack honey is a much less viscous liquor than the American honey, but it still has like very long lasting legs on the glass, and that looked super runny. So I didn't, that's the reason I was trying to clarify.
The Evan Williams honey I'm trying to get into now, and by the way, this label, this is what it looks like to just not give a fuck right here. It's just, yeah, just put the name, put a fucking B. That's all you got to do. And they put this kind of, for anybody who's ever tried to open one of these before, you know this is going to be a pain in the ass because I've got to like crack this. Like unless you have like you have
Call
to have
Jessie
like little,
and have her open the jar for you.
you need to have like those little baby fingers, like baby strength hands to get this open. I don't even know how an adult is supposed to open this.
So this bottle, when I was 20, I was going through a breakup. It was like, the relationship ends. Milton comes over with a bottle of Evan Williams honey, and we proceed to drink the whole thing. It was disgusting. From what I remember, I mean, the hangover was bad. I don't think I really I think I was too young to really grasp what I was drinking, if that makes sense. I was just drinking it to drink it because I was sad.
Yeah. Well, I will say that Evan Williams on its own is very sweet. Like it's a very sweet whiskey, bourbon. So I'm betting on this one being the sweetest of the bunch. What's the proof on it?
Proof on this one is back up to 70.
Okay.
And the marketing varies just slightly between these. So the Jim Beam honey says real honey liqueur infused with Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And then the Evan Williams honey says Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey blended with honey liqueur. So they kind of, to your point earlier about the mindsets going into it, they almost kind of say that on the bottles in their own way. So
Jack does too.
I would say that the Evan Williams honey lies kind of somewhere in between the two, the Jim Beam honey and the Jack Daniels honey in darkness. And it's still darker than the Jim Beam honey, but it's lighter for sure than the Jack Daniels honey. And I think it's probably about the same as the American honey. I almost said American turkey, but the smell is, it almost smells like what the aftertaste was on the American honey. It's almost like pine sol-ish from the smell.
Interesting.
Or like cleaner-ish, but a little sweet, like sort of a sweet cleaner. I don't know, man. I've been drinking too much fucking honey liqueur. That's my first reaction. I think it's this one's super sweet too. This one is this one, I'm really trying to rank them right now, but I just feel like I don't really like, especially like either of these two. But I think I like the Evan Williams honey more than I like the Jim Beam honey because you can tell that there's something more to it. There's definitely more alcohol content to it, and you can tell that. It is it's as easy to sip as Jack Daniels honey is, but it's it's got some of the same problems that American honey does. I think I would actually rank it a little bit higher than the American honey though. So I think overall my quick ranking would be Jack Daniel's honey is probably the top. And then I think it's probably the Evan Williams honey. And then I think it's the American honey, pretty much like right there. And then the Jim Beam honey. And the Jim Beam honey's like a significant step down and basically not even alcohol to me.
Yeah.
So that's my quick review.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
I'm so sad that you had to go through a breakup and drink a whole bottle of this, right?
All right, boys, let's rate it. I'll go first. I'll be happy to go first because I know exactly where I'm at. Now this is based on an assumption. If I remember correctly, what I rated the American honey last week. I think I rated American honey a 5.5.
You did.
And my argument was that not so much for drinking, but it goes great on waffles, goes great in coffee, etc. So based on that, I'm actually going to give Jack Daniel's an exact same score of 5.5, but for a very different reason. This would not taste good on waffles. This would not taste good in coffee. So it doesn't get those bonus points that American honey did. But this is a much better whiskey drinker's honey flavored sipper. So let's be clear, I'm never going to buy a bottle of this. That will never, ever, ever happen. However, I could understand somebody buying a bottle of it and sipping on it occasionally. I could understand somebody buying a bottle of it and figuring out some great mixers that probably taste fucking fantastic. Like for me, this is a much easier type of a whiskey to think of cocktails because like I feel like you could just pour this in a glass and not even need simple syrup, add some ice, add some orange zest and sip it, and there's your old fashioned, if you will. So I give it a 5.5, but for very different reasons than I gave the American honey. It's just a much better whiskey type of a drink for me. So it gets a 5.5 in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 5.8, let's say. 5.8. I think that I like it more than American honey as well. I think that it's an indulgent drink. You know, I hearken it back to a time where Ryan and I would on a Wednesday, we would drink for 8 hours and we would just have a good time, and we would have Philly cheesesteaks followed up by some fries with cheese sauce. And then we'd have a couple of these, and then maybe later we'd order a cheese pizza. You know what I mean? It's kind of a drink of excess in a way. And that's how I'd kind of recommend it when you're looking for something that's a little on the sweeter side or something, because like I said, it's not specifically a honey drink to me. It's just it's a sweeter drink that you might be looking for if you're a bourbon drinker or a whiskey drinker. It's something, if you haven't tried it, I almost think it's a rite of passage to try like a Jack Honey or something like that, just because it's such a common sipper that I feel like a lot of people start with who are not big drinkers. And I think it's always interesting what people started drinking, what some of like their first drinks were. For all those reasons, I think it's nostalgic. It's a nice little drink, and I wouldn't necessarily buy it all the time, but every once in a while, you know, it's something I would go back to or whatever, and just because of that nostalgia. So,
yeah, I'm going to be right around where you're at, Steven, and a lot of the same reasons, exactly what you said. I'm going to go with 6.0. And the reason I'm going a little higher is I've had this in hot tea, essentially. We've had at our office, we had a whole like screwball presentation once where we had dinner or breakfast drinks and coffee and a bunch of other things. And I had this in a hot tea once, and it was really good. And like you guys kind of said, it's not as sweet as the American honey or the other two you had tonight, Steven. It complements tea well because it's not overly sweet. You don't get that artificially fake honey or sweetness to it, which is good. It's an easy sipper. For me, it's much easier to drink than American honey. Even smelling the American honey, and I like the American honey, but it's a lot to take on. And if you're one of those people who just wants, a bourbon-esque drink, a whiskey-esque drink where you're not going to get bogged down with so much sugar and additives and all that. And not saying that Jack Honey doesn't have those things, because it does, but it's much more truer to form to regular whiskey than the alternatives. So for that reason, I'm going to go with 6.0.
Another bourbon show.